like this I've ever done. So help me, please. I might. It's very interesting seeing there's lots and lots of you who have different interests in different things. So I'm going to try and touch on a bit on some of the productions that I've worked on. If you have any questions, please ask. We will have a kind of question and answer session at the end, but it kind of might be a bit rambling, if you like. This morning, I'm just going to talk about how I got into the business and what I've been doing for the last 25 years. And then this afternoon, we're going to run a fight workshop, if you like, where I go into more detail about how I will construct a fight for a film, television or theatre, which is all different. Okay. We've got a few people here who are interested in medieval, yes? Yeah? And Star Wars? And medieval and Star Wars? And Doctor Who? Highlander? Yeah, all that stuff. Oh, right, okay.
Can I just quickly come up a minute? Yeah. Extra items not on the programme, it's just been added in. Many of you sat there later on. Following the turkey readings in the bar, we're going to be doing fanfic consequences. I'll have to explain it later on. That's all, it's not in the programme, but it's...
Yeah. Okay, my name is Richard Bonehill, and I work as a swordmaster for films and television. Basically, what that means is that I will train the actors, actresses, stunt doubles, and produce a fight for a film. I started in the business about 25 years ago, and what I'm going to do is just kind of tell you basically how I got into it. I was born in London in the middle of the last century, hell of a long time ago, and my first kind of introduction to sci-fi, if you like, was through comics, which I understand still kind of goes on today. In those days, the big kind of heroes, comic-wise, were Dan Dare, who you may have heard of, and Flash Gordon. And that basically was about it. There wasn't a lot of television about. In fact, we were so poor, we didn't have a television. There was only one, when I was growing up, there was only one television actually in the street. So the big thing for everybody was called Saturday morning pictures, where you used to go along on a Saturday to the local cinema, and you paid sixpence, which was about 2p of today's money, I would think. And it was only for kids. And it was an absolute riot. It was mayhem in there. Adults weren't allowed, and the only adults in there were the people who were actually trying to control the kids. They used to show 3 or 4 films, and occasionally some old films, but mostly they were kind of specially made, low-budget, sci-fi, westerns were big. So you had people like Hopalong Cassidy, The Lone Ranger, that's going back a few years, isn't it? Flash Gordon, all kind of very, very low-budget things, but occasionally they would show old feature films, if you like. And this is where probably I first got interested, seeing the films of Errol Flynn and people like that. At that time, most of London was a bomb site. It had been heavily bombed, so there were lots and lots of areas which were just left open rubble, which meant that we had the most fantastic playground in the world. You just had bombed buildings, you had complete sets there for you. So you basically just went out, you got a stick in your hand and you were Errol Flynn or Flash Gordon or whatever you like. You just had the most wonderful, wonderful time. At these Saturday morning pictures, it was a battleground. You soon learned that you didn't go in the stalls, you went upstairs, because one of the good fun things is that you bought some ice cream, melted it on the radiators, and poured it on all the people down below. The best weapon that you had was a catapult, because you could kind of fire things at the screen. Peanuts and some of the kind of older members here will probably remember some of this. And it was just an absolute riot, and that was your big release. The films that we saw there were some of the classics. I'm going to start off just by showing a fight from one of them, because I think we all ought to start every day with a good fight. Number one. This is Basil Rathbone and Errol Flynn from the Adventures of Robin Hood. Can you just hold it there for a second? Just so you know, sorry about that. You probably all know this film inside out. But Claude Rains, who is King John, has decided to take over while King Richard is away. And Basil Rathbone, who plays Sir Guy Gisborne, who's the nasty. And this is one of the classic film fights of all time. The sword work isn't particularly good, to tell you the truth. But there's everything in it that we now kind of think about as cliches, if you like, in the sword work. You know, you've got big empty spaces, but there does happen to be a candle there, so you have to cut it in half. You've got a table which you have to leap on, or, you know, fall over. No chandelier in this one, unfortunately. A big flight of steps. I mean, the worst thing you can ever do is fight on steps, because it's an absolute nightmare. But of course, there's a flight of steps there, so they have to use it. There are a couple of very clever things in it. If you notice at the beginning, Basil Rathbone has this big, heavy clothes on. Now, when you're doing fights, the costume department want to give you all the costume they've got. They want to give you hats, cloaks, and they're really, really difficult to fight in. So what you try and do is you get rid of most of it at the beginning of the fight, any way you can. And in this scene, if you look carefully, you'll see that Basil Rathbone starts off with this big, heavy cloak on, and then just before he gets into a single action, he gets rid of the cloak, or the cloak has got rid of it, which is quite cleverly done. Basil Rathbone was a very good fencer. Errol Flynn was all right, he was average. He in fact took somebody's eye out early in his career, slumped his eye out. So he was always extremely nervous. But what this fight has is it's got style, it's got humour, it's got corps à corps where they can stop and talk to each other in the middle of a fight. You know, which is always a bit strange. But it's just a whole kind of Hollywood wonderful thing.
Oh, brother? Richard the Lion, Part of England?
Richard no longer exists. From this moment forward, I, John, am King of England. Aren't you a little premature, brother? Richard, the Lion Lord. King Lion. King Richard. It is the King. The King is.
Quick of the outlaws! Kill him! Seize him!
All going and help the leather in the background. exactly what it was like in the cinema. Everybody cheering and booing when the baddie came in. You know, it's absolutely wonderful, wonderful atmosphere. Quite interesting in as far as quite long takes in that, where they actually had to do the sword fight. Whereas in a lot of films you do today, it's cut down, shot like a pop video, cut down into 2 or 3 strokes, so people don't have to learn complicated routines. Okay, so really, that's what got me started. And that type of thing, you know, is just so fantastic. And it still translates into all the different sci-fi things that you might have to do along the way. What happened is, very, very quickly, I grew up, I was educated, I went to art school, and I was trained as a jewellery designer and a goldsmith. I was in that business for 10 years, and I started off doing extremely avant-garde stuff, which is what I really wanted to do. And I ended up, after 10 years, with a big company with 50 people working for me, and I was making gold-plated machine guns for despots in Africa and Far East. In the end, one of the biggest jobs I did was, there was a very interesting gentleman called Emperor Bugassa. You remember him? He used to eat people. He decided he was going to be made God Emperor for life. So he had all of his regalia made by Cartiers of Paris, and I subcontracted to them. And they were exact replicas of Napoleon's coronation regalia. So I got to a point in my life where I thought, this is absolutely disgusting. I was making a lot of money doing it, but I was doing it for all the wrong reasons, basically. So at the age of 28, I gave it all up and sat back and thought, what do I really want to do? And the only things that I could think about doing was being a cowboy and a pirate and a spaceman. Not a lot of job opportunities, really. So I thought I'll have to try and do some work on film. I've always fenced competitively, and I've always ridden horses. So I took a year off and went to America and basically did all my money in for a year. I ended up riding rodeos in Arizona and Texas, and not for very long, I hasten to add. I rode saddle broncs, and I acted as a clown, which is, if any of you have seen rodeo, when someone is kicked off, falls off, the clown has a big barrel, and it goes up to the animal and sticks it in front of the animal, and then leaps in the barrel, and the animal kicks it out of it, basically. I decided that I wanted to try Brahma bulls, which was probably the worst decision of my life, as they are terrifying animals. My first ride on a Brahma bull, I lasted half a second, and my second ride, I lasted a bit longer, but it turned around and then tap danced all over me, so I broke both my legs. So that was the end of my kind of rodeoing career. I came back to England, and I started working on Wild West shows, medieval jousting shows, any kind of travelling shows, circus. And this was to get my equity card so I could work in the business. In my first medieval jousting show, I was playing the Red Knight, and the idea is that I ride in, hands in the air, nothing on the reins, come down the front, rear the horse, and then go into the show. I did this, except when the horse reared, I fell off in front of about 2,000 people. I then spent the next 20 minutes trying to catch the horse, who would run over to one side of the arena and eat grass, and I'd be doing the lines and everything, and as I got over and just about to grab him, he'd run over to the other side of the arena. So, but some of the best times in my life. I was working for £15 a week, for which I would have to fall off the horse about 2 shows about 8 times a day. I've been doing this for a couple of years, and somebody saw me and asked if I would double for a film, to double Anthony Andrews. in a film called Ivanhoe. And they offered me £400 every time I fell off a horse. So I thought, no, this is a good idea, because if you get it wrong the first time, you still get paid £400. So you do it 2 or 3 times, and you clock up a nice amount of money. As it happens, Anthony Andrews is an extremely good horseman. And so I basically did nothing for 5 weeks. I appeared in a few scenes, rode alongside his squire, and hung around with him and the other stars. And I thought, this is absolutely wonderful. This is what I want to do. And that's how I got into it. I started working as a stand-in, as an extra, anything I could do to actually get into the business. I got my equity card. In those days, if you were going to work on television, you had to be a member of equity. If you were doing live shows or working as a film extra, you didn't have to be. You could actually join something called central casting. The way it worked is you phone them up every day, 2 or 3 times a day, and they would say, okay, be at the Hammersmith Odeon, 5 o'clock tomorrow morning. You get down there, you put on a coach, and then you'd be bussed off somewhere to the wild, some clay pit or something, and dressed up as some character. You never knew what you were going to do. There were hardcore of extras, wonderful, wonderful people, and some terrible criminals as well. Big, wide range of them, who would have all their own uniforms, like policeman's uniform, dinner dress, stuff like that, so you would get more and more work. You wouldn't have specialised uniforms like science fiction's uniforms, medieval uniforms, but any kind of normal day stuff. The extras, as I say, wide range. Some people who had done music hall, who were cabaret artists, other people that were just doing it for easy money, criminals, absolutely just a complete cross-section. Some of them would come in the morning, clock in, and then disappear all day, and then come back at night, pick up the money. But the way I worked it is that I wanted to find out as much about the movie industry as I could, so I worked extremely hard at it. And over the next 10 years, I probably fought in every war there's ever been, every war there's likely to be in the future, and did an amazing amount of work. I mean, one Doctor Who episode, I was pilot of Concorde. It was the first time it had ever been used. And I've got this great photograph of me in the uniform standing by Concorde. During this period, I worked on the first, now, I have to get this right. It's not really the 2nd and 3rd Star Wars, is it? It's the 5th and 6th. I worked on Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. Okay? I do apologise in advance if I get some of the facts slightly wrong, like the names of the characters and things, but I'm not an expert on science fiction, but I just worked on the thing. All right? So I was kind of in the business, started working. And because I've always worked with horses and swords, I worked on a lot of the kind of science, fantasy, fiction. There were films like Kroll, Legends, Highlander, lots of things like that where you would turn up, get dressed up, go chasing around on a horse, and basically do battle scenes. Did you get number 2 ready? It ended up just skipping forward a bit to what I do now, which is doubling and choreographing fights. I don't do too much doubling nowadays because they tend to ask you to fall off horses, and at my age it's not a good idea. It just takes longer kind of thing. But in contrast to what you saw earlier, I'm just going to, before I go on to the science fiction side, I'm just going to show you a little clip. This is me fighting, and it was for a television program called Ghost Hunters, which was about ghosts. And the story here is there was a beautiful young lady, a cruel husband, and a lover. And the wife finds out about them, and they have this fight. Normally, I get killed. But I'm very proud of this one, because I don't actually get killed in this one. I win the fight. Hooray! Yes, absolutely right. I probably died more times. I think I have the record for being the most dead bodies on any James Bond film. So I'm normally the one that gets killed. But in this one, you'll see that I actually survived. I am a very good-looking one with the long hair and the shirt, not the one in the waistcoat. So, would you like to give this a go? Wrong one. Oh, sorry. Small technical hitch. Try number 4. You can see how good technically I am, can't you? It was shot in black and white, by the way. It's not that old. Actually sleep with me, she then commits suicide. That was quite an interesting fight because it was done in we had 1 day's rehearsal, 2 days and the weapons, we used dummy weapons a lot of the time, didn't actually turn up. So we were using actual steel cavalry sabres for that, which concentrates the mind incredibly. Okay, moving on. In 1979, I was asked to work on The Empire Strikes Back. And so I did 3 weeks work on that. What basically I played a stormtrooper in the white costume, a snow trooper, which is in the long costume, and something else, and I did a fair amount of, and a rebel soldier, and a fair amount of doubling and standing in. It was very interesting at that time because Star Wars was one of the first movies where they were bringing in a lot of computer stuff which had never actually been used before. Up to then, special effects had been on the set. Explosions, things that you could actually see. But with the Star Wars films, they started adding a lot of stuff after it. The most obvious example is the lightsabers. When we were working with them on the set, basically you had a handle with a bit of stick. I mean, similar to this. And when you actually come to see it on film, and people go, I mean, we were as amazed as anybody else because we didn't actually know what the hell was going to happen. In Empire Strikes Back, most of the work I did was, and a Tauntaun handler. If you know the Tauntaun, which is a big, like, pregnant kangaroo type animal, they came into the dressing room one day where we would sit around for days and days dressed in these uniforms, which is excruciatingly painful, especially the snow trooper and the stormtrooper. They were wearing a nylon catsuit that you put on, and all the bits were actually attached to it. So once you were in it, you couldn't sit down in it because it was just cut into your bum all the time. You couldn't go to the toilet in it. You know, it was a big thing when you want to go to loo. But they came in, they said, right, who knows about horses? So I said, yes. And they said, right, you're in charge of the Tauntaun. So I said, right you are. What the hell is a Tauntaun? No idea. But basically, you're working all day. It was filmed at Elstree, as these two that I'm talking about, Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi, were filmed at Elstree, at the studios which unfortunately no longer exist. I think there's a Sainsbury's or a Tesco that stands on the site now. Wonderful, wonderful sound stages, fabulous sets. All the ice caverns were carved out of white polystyrene and lots of salt, full as earth used to create atmosphere. I'm going to show you a little clip, which is number 2, thank you, which is just a very small section. It's an entrance of Darth Vader with some stormtroopers, one of which is me. Can you spot it? This is when he first comes down onto the planet. Probably my old video. It's just coming up now. Fantastic. Did you see me? The one in what?
White.
Yes, absolutely. The reason I showed that is that took 6 days. Normally, on a feature film, you work a 12-hour day and you get about 2 minutes of film, edited film. We had a big problem with this scene. As you can see, there was an ice tunnel. There was another ice tunnel that went off at right angles, and they built a wall of polystyrene in between and set loads of explosives on it, which basically are air rams, air pumps. They then put salt full as earth on top, and standing behind there was me and another guy at the front, dressed as the snow trooper. Darth Vader, played by Keith Prowse, behind us, and then 6 other snow troopers behind. It had taken 3 days to set up this shot, right? So we all know exactly what we're going to do. The explosion's going to come off, we're going to go through this, turn left, go off down the corridors. Now, the problem with the snow troopers' uniform and the stormtroopers' one is that they had these plastic eyes in them, which were kind of cloudy. So you couldn't see where the hell you were going. It was like being underwater all the time. So that was difficult. That's why, if you notice in the Star Wars films, a lot of the troopers are going along like this all the time. They can't actually see, and they're constantly dragging their heads on doors because you couldn't see a thing. So, we rehearsed it a number of times without doing the explosion. We come down to it, countdown, right? 4, 3, 2, 1, bang! This explosion goes off. It was the biggest explosion in the world, without doubt, ever. Everything goes everywhere. There's a complete whiteout, so you can't see anything. You don't know what you're doing, so I'm the first out the door. So I go straight out the door, collide with the wall on the other side. My helmet goes right the way around, so I can't see anything. And I start staggering round. I make about 10 yards, fall flat on my face. The other guy following me up comes just on top of me. So he's now wriggling on top of me, looking like he's doing something very peculiar. Meanwhile, Darth Vader, dear Dave Prowse, is standing in the tunnel. The two guys behind have stood on his cloak. So he's going like this. Eventually, because he was a big guy, the cloak comes out, he strides out into the tunnel, turns left, absolutely fine, to find us two on the floor making love in front of him. All the other guys come out and all fall over each other. So it ended up in absolute chaos. Everybody in streams of laughter, dust and smoke everywhere. But obviously no good. There is an outtake there somewhere, which I would love to see. I mean, it then took another 3 days to reset the whole thing, rebuild the wall, do everything, and then to get that little shot there. Okay, so it was like 6 days' work, you know. Obviously, there were other things going on. Note about Dave Prowse, Darth Vader. He was a big guy. As you probably know, he was a bodybuilder, Green Cross Code man. He was from Bristol. And lovely, lovely guy, would learn all the lines every day. So when you, obviously his voice was dubbed all the way through, but we worked all the time with him, and he would come in, say his lines in this broad Bristol accent, which was great, much amusing. But he would do the lines every day, ultimate professional. Now, it was while I was working on this, I have the distinction of being the only extra who was asked for his autograph by Mark Hamill. It was a bit scary, really, because what happened, we were all stood in a line, and we all had these stormtroopers things on the Death Star, I think. Or was that, I think it was. And the director comes on, the first assistant director, Dave Tomlin, and he says, right, everybody, take your masks off. So we all stand there, we all took the masks off. There's Mark Hamill. He says, it's him! And I thought, oh, God. But what it was Mark Hamill was a great comic fan, and he was a great Eagle fan, the Eagle comics. And at that time, it was the 100th anniversary, I think it was 100, of the Eagle comic. And at the same time, I've been doing some modelling. And I had appeared in this Eagle comic as a hitman or something in one of the storyboard things they've done. And he'd been sitting in his dressing room, read this, thought he was recognised me, thought it was great, and so he came out and asked for my autograph. There are a couple of photographs here which you can have a look at later, which are highly illegal because we weren't allowed to take photographs in any of the costumes. But there's me as a rebel soldier, and also me as a snowtrooper without the mask on, which was a sin. We weren't allowed to do that. That was taken in the dressing room at Elswick. On the following film, Return of the Jedi, I was brought on at the start, so I had about 9 weeks' work on it, every day, which was great. Your basic pay was about 30 quid a day, which you would get in cash at the end of the day. But if you used your head and you were prepared to work hard, you used to get extra payments called special action. if you went in, if you did special things, if you didn't mind falling about and doing mask work, uncomfortable thing, you used to get special action. So you could end up at the end of the day with £100 in cash. And when you work for 6 weeks, 8 weeks on film, it's pretty damn good money for running about not doing anything. On the Return of the Jedi, I played Nine Numb, who was a co-pilot to Billy D. Williams. A lot of mask work, which I've found out, I'm afraid I don't know all the names of the characters, but one of them was, we used to call Three Eyes, which I think is called Three E's or something. Anybody know? No? Okay. And again, Stormtrooper and a number of other mask stuff anyway. Have we fans of the Return of the Jedi here? Yeah? Oh yeah. Yeah, oh good. Originally it was called Revenge of the Jedi. All the way through the production it was called Revenge of the Jedi. Interesting, I saw we had Princess Leia here earlier, dressed in the costume. It was very, very hard work because a lot of the mask work, you were dressed in a kind of bodysuit, if you like, as a pilot or whatever, and you had this latex mask, which did up with Velcro down the back and pinned underneath your costume. So, obviously it was extremely hot on the set. Lots of lights, lots of things going on. Whenever you could, you took this thing off and held it down in front of you like that. And everybody working in a mask was assigned one person for makeup who would swab you off, keep you cool, because people were passing out all the time. If you didn't have time between takes, because it used to take some time to put it back on and off again, you used to keep it on, and the makeup girls had hairdryers, which they'd stick in the front of your face and put to full blast on cold, which was great because it kept you very, very kind of cool. The trouble is your eyes were watering all the time, and it was pretty uncomfortable work. I remember particularly uncomfortable was in Jabba the Hutt's palace, which was really, really, really hot, and on his barge, which again was fairly uncomfortable work. When we were doing this, something fairly strange happened, which I'm a bit ashamed of actually, but I didn't know what was happening at the time. The second assistant director called me in and he said, what I want you to do is I want you to go and do a photo shoot with Darth Vader, and there's going to be 6 stormtroopers, and I want you to muck it up. Do anything you can to delay the shoot. But you've got to keep Dave Prowse there for 2 hours. And I thought, well, this is a bit strange. I don't know what's going on here. He said the photographer's in on it, so he knows what's happening. What actually was going on was that Dave Prowse did not know that when they took the helmet off him, it wasn't going to be him. He thought, after all the work he'd done on him, it was going to be him. He had crossed the production company on something. I never know exactly what the true story is. We heard he had sent out a Christmas card which said, Merry Christmas from Dave Prowse, Darth Vader. Now they were very strong on those things in those days. He could send out a Christmas card from Darth Vader, but he couldn't send one out saying Dave Prowse. So my job was actually to keep him off the set while this was going on. So I went into this photo shoot. Took about 20 minutes to set up, just about to take the first thing, I dropped my gun. So, okay, start again. My helmet's turned around the wrong way. I've fallen over. I've done this for 2 hours. Everybody thinks I'm an absolute idiot. But it worked, and I got extra money for it. But he is a lovely, lovely man. Right, moving on. That is kind of the bit that I did on Star Wars. If you have any questions later, please ask. I then did a number of other films, including Flash Gordon, Kroll, and I was asked to do a film called Greystones, The Legend of Tarzan, which starred Christopher Lambert, who I'd never heard of at the time, young French actor. And they said, come along, we want you to be a stand-in for him, and because we know you don't mind doing fairly peculiar stuff. So I said, okay, so we got there, and they said, right, as a stand-in, normally, all you have to be is basically the same height, and physically about the same. The first thing they asked me, John Alcott, who was the lighting director, who was a lovely, lovely man, now dead, said, you've got to wear makeup every day, because Christoph was wearing this very dark suntan makeup. So I had to wear this makeup, full body makeup, every single day. So when I got there, I used to spend half an hour in the toilet putting all this stuff on, come out looking like this terrible streaky orange animal, but it was okay for the lighting. One of the things they asked me to do is it was filmed in the Cameroons and in Elstree in the soundstage, and they built this jungle which was full of these wonderful apes, all guys in suits, and a certain amount of real apes, and other animals, pythons, and big bitey things that chase you with big teeth. So I've been working on a bit on the first week, and they took me on the set, and they said, right, Richard, just put this boa constrictor around you, will you? And they brought on this thing, it was like 50 foot long, and weighed a ton. And they wrapped it around me, and I'm standing there like that, because it weighed, and everyone's watching. And I'm thinking, yeah. And they think, oh, well, that's all right, that's fine. Let's put it on Christoph now. So they were finding out if this thing was going to squeeze me. So I thought, and that's fine. So a couple of days later, they said, right, we want you to swim across this lake. I said, yeah, okay. And, oh, we're just lining up the camera, just swim across the lake. So I said, okay. They said, oh, by the way, there might be some things in the lake that you might bump up against. So I said, what? It has nothing to worry about. You've never seen anyone swim so fast in your life. I went across that lake like that, got out the other side, and I found out there were two pygmy hippos in it. Now, pygmy hippos are like this big, so they're not particularly small, and they've got big teeth. And the reason they asked me to do that was to see if these things were going to attack it. So I got an extra 25 quid. About a year later, sorry, I'm rambling off on a tangent. I got another call to work on Highlander. Christoph liked the work I'd done, so to work on Highlander. Everybody familiar with Highlander? Yeah. Great film, I thought. Wonderful film. Kind of starts off, you know, way back in time, comes through to the future. Good concept. Christoph, very, very nice fellow. The end scene in Highlander, the end fight, is one of the most spectacular and as far as technically difficult to do. We filmed it at a place called Bigton Gasworks in London. Bigton Gasworks was a highly contaminated site where we used to film quite a lot. It is said that they can't build on it for 1,000 years because the dust there will kill you. It's been used for many, many films. There's a whole section outside which is like a Second World War bomb site, you know. Things like Heavy Metal Jacket was filmed there. They transformed it into Vietnam, you know, lots and lots of stuff. But the end scene was actually done in this big hangar there. And there were lots and lots of technical things going on. There was, the fight was going all the way through. There was big stuff falling down, electrical stuff. There was a massive tank of water coming down from one end. And then we fell through down on descenders into a lower area where there was a big explosion. This should be, do you have a number on this one? How about that one? Number 3. How's that? It's got Highlander. problems with this fight. I was doubling for Christoph, and there was a stunt guy whose name I can't remember, a very, very big guy, doubling for the Kurgan. So what you will see is bits of me and the other double, and bits of Christoph and, what was the name of the actor? Nancy Brown. Clancy Brown, absolutely frightening.
Yeah.
Big guy, right? But technically, this took about a week to do. Technically very difficult. Once that water had been let loose, it couldn't go back in again. They did fill it up, but the whole thing was a big tank. It's always difficult doing a sword fight when you're knee-deep in water, obviously. One of the interesting things is that although I've always specialised in horses and swords, in so many science fiction films, when it comes to the end fight, you know, all the way through, they've been flying around in rockets, shooting laser guns. When it comes to the end fight, what do? Pick up a sword. And this is one of the most wonderful things. It has got something to do with standing in front of somebody with a bit of cold steel or lightsaber or whatever in your hand, and having the courage and the technique to be able to use it. It's a very noble thing. Anybody can fire a gun, unfortunately, as we found out in our present day lives. Any idiot can pick up a gun. But actually to get close to someone and stick a knife in him or to use a sword, it takes a certain amount of skill. So it is quite interesting that all the way through, from kind of time immemorial up to in the future, the sword is the weapon of choice. Fairly lucky thing for me as well. So this is the end bit of Highlander. I don't know how much you'll be able to see because it starts off fairly dark.
can be only one.
Sitting here and watching that and thinking, oh my God, Doctor Who, I haven't said anything about Doctor Who. So, very quickly, I did a load of Doctor Who stuff, mostly uncredited, mostly as different monsters. So notice we have a Cyberman there, and lots of green slimy things, and also as there was a pool of people that they used to use that were 6 foot tall or over and kind of young, slim and fairly good looking. And they were known as the Camp Guard, basically because most of them were gay actors. And we used to all sit around in the dressing rooms. And it was quite funny because some of them were absolutely outrageous and used to tell the most amazing stories. It just reminded me actually that in the Empire in Return of the Jedi, the Imperial Guard that come in with the Emperor in those wonderful uniforms, like 6 of the most camp guys you will ever meet in your life, who, when they weren't filming, would be going, oh. My claim to fame, probably my biggest claim to fame in Doctor Who was that I played a security guard that chased Tom Baker up a big pylon, and he fell down and became Peter Davison, which was quite funny. But anyway, so I'm afraid I've ignored Doctor Who a bit. Mostly terrifying things, the most terrifying thing ever produced, the Daleks. Most of it was done at the BBC Centre on Wood Lane, known as the Donut, big round building, on very small sets, made out of cardboard and paper and everything. And the thing I remember most about it, we were always told, when you get shot, don't fall against the scenery. Because the whole lot's going to collapse. Also, if you have a gun in your hand, don't drop it or fall on it, because it's plastic and it's going to shatter. So you'll see lots of guys getting shot and going, not quite as bad as that. I brought along a number of things, weapons to actually show you later in the second kind of thing, which is going to be a bit more technical on how we use weapons. Some photographs from Star Wars, and this is quite interesting. This isn't the original, because I got that at home, but this is a copy of the last call sheet from Revenge of the Jedi. This is the very last day of shooting, and we would be issued with these every evening beforehand, which would tell us what time to get in the morning and everything. It is still called, at this point, Revenge of the Jedi. I can't believe I didn't have to buy a t-shirt at the time, because we were flog t-shirts. I never got one, and to have revenge would be nice. On this day, I was standing in for an actor called Glyn Barker, who was playing an officer. And at the bottom, there's a nice note that says, on the last day of shooting on Jedi in the UK, the producers would like to sincerely thank all the British crew and cast for their valuable participation in this production. We are sure that this will be another film of which we will feel proud that you have been a part. It says, remember the end of shoot party on stage 9 on Thursday the 1st of April after shoot. So at the end of every film you have a end of shoot party where everyone gets drunk and you can insult each other. And says they're going to be in love for the rest of their time, and you never see them again until the end of the film. There's some other stuff here. Recently, a guy in America who is a big Star Wars fan found out that I'd done this work on Star Wars, and he produced some composite photographs for me to autograph, and purely for his own use, which I said fine, which I did and sent off for him. Next moment, it appeared on eBay and sold for $50 as a rare photograph from someone that worked on these things. So I have produced these things, and what I'm going to do later is I'm going to autograph them, and I'm going to charge £3 if you want one, of which £1 will go to your charity, £1 will go to my charity, which is the Lifeboat Institution, and £1 I keep for myself, basically. Two things. All right. There is also, I've just written a book, got nothing to do with science fiction. It's on a cousin of mine who was one of the first male impersonators in the British musical. So this is kind of a little book, research document. If anybody is interested in the musical, that is also for sale. Right, now, would anybody like to ask any questions? I'm sure there's lots of things I haven't covered.
Can I ask one as the chair immediately when we were talking on the phone? You mentioned, and I happen to think it's one of Ridley Scott's greatest films, but unfortunately it's one of his first films.
You don't mind if I sit down?
Any tales to tell of the duelists?
I've got some clips of The Duelist, which I'm going to show in a second.
Right, okay.
I didn't work on it, but without doubt, in my opinion, the greatest sword fighting film ever. It was the first film that Ridley Scott actually directed, and I'm a great fan of Ridley Scott. He was a lighting director, director of photography before then, and it was the first one he directed. The sword work was done by a gentleman called William Hobbs, who I've worked with extensively over the years as his assistant. He is probably the greatest sword master ever. He did all the stuff like Excalibur, in the 70s, wonderful Three Musketeers film, almost every film that you can think of he's done. I've worked with him on Man in the Iron Mask. I think I've done 6 productions with him. The wonderful thing about The Duelist is that you have, I think, 5 duels, all with different weapons, which all show a different style. Wonderful, wonderful tension bringing up. Absolutely. If ever you get, I believe it's still on video and DVD. If you ever get the chance, do buy it. Absolutely fantastic. Unfortunately, I didn't work on it. Any other? Yes?
I know you've done all these sort of stuff in films. As a fencer working in clubs, what's the worst, what's the worst sort of accident that you've ever seen happen in a club?
In a fencing club?
Yeah.
In my club, none. We don't, with all of these things, whether you're in a fencing club or working on a set, safety is always the main priority. I mean, my job is to make something look as dangerous as possible, but to keep it absolutely safe. If you're working on a film and an actor gets one scratch on his finger, then all hell breaks loose. The insurance people are down and sad. In a club, for instance, where I coach in Truro, we have very strict discipline, and so there are never any accidents. Simple as that. No one ever points a weapon at anybody unless they're wearing full protective equipment. The worst accident I've ever actually seen fencing is a friend of mine, Rob Bruniges, who was world junior champion. He actually ripped all the muscles from his groin out of his pelvis, which was not nice. And he actually, in his competitive career, was run through twice, which was rather unfortunate. in those days, modern fencing weapons, I bought some here, are very, very strong and specially made, so they don't break very often. Back in the 70s, he was using a non-barraging blade, well, his opponent was, and it snapped off and he lunged at it and it went straight through him, which surprised him greatly. As far as people always ask about accidents, I've been very, very fortunate, and I haven't had very many at all. I always look upon it, if you have accidents, accidents can happen, but if things go wrong, somebody's at fault. You're not very good. Over 25 years, I've lost 3 friends who have all been killed, but each one of them was killed when they were having fun, not on the set. 2 of them were killed in parachuting accidents, one in a motorbike. One of those was actually on a television program, where a fellow called Tip Tippin was doing a very, very difficult stunt about somebody whose parachute didn't open, and his reserve parachute didn't open. So he was wearing a dummy parachute, a dummy reserve parachute, and then a 3rd parachute underneath. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. And when you're doing something like that, you only have one chance, and that goes. It is very, when you're working with something like that. This is 1885 English cavalry sabre. Doesn't take much to actually do someone a hell of a lot of harm with it. Doesn't have to be sharp at all, but you can take someone's eye out in a moment. So safety is always my biggest priority. If I'm working on a film and something has gone wrong, people in Australia will know within an hour. Friends of mine working in Australia. The business is that close. And of course, all hell breaks loose. Especially if it's a leading artist who's been hurt. So it is safety the whole time. That's why we use a lot of dummy weapons all the time. But even with something, for instance, like this has got a modern fencing blade. This type of thing would be suitable for the 3 Musketeers or something like that. It's got a blunted end on it, but it'll still go straight through your head. That is not going to hurt you so much. You're going to get a few taps, but something like that. And that's why this afternoon I'll be explaining a few techniques of how these things are used. Yeah. The one I hate more than anything is knives. To do a good knife fight is just such a pain. It's all been done before. It's very difficult to come up with something new. Quarterstaffs are great fun. Always lots of fun. Nice moves you can always come up with. Guns are guns are guns are guns. Yeah. You fire a gun at someone, run away, fire another, and done. And of course, in a lot of films, the guns get bigger and bigger and bigger, and so you end up with Die Hard and stuff like that, where they have these wonderful machine guns, big cannons and things, and that's really all down to special effects and everything like that.
The remembered is that the old-fashioned gun, of course, if it runs out of ammunition or jammed, you could always hit them.
Absolutely. They do reckon, working Wild West shows, I know what this is like with the Western gun. They will jam the whole time. Oh, yeah. They reckon your best bet, actually, if you're in the Wild West, to go up and hit someone over the head with the other end of it. Because, I remember one occasion where at the end of the show I was supposed to get right off and get shot off with a shotgun. And, the big finale, off I go, tear her off into the distance, and it was actually the heroine, a girl, picked up this shotgun normally it goes bang, off I come. Click, nothing. I'm like going, you know, right back in, let her pull you off and stamp on your head or something. There's the famous theatrical story where it happened and the person, I forget who it was, just went up to him and kicked him in the shins and said, "The boot was poisoned." But you don't have that problem with the sword, except the sword can break.
Yeah, but even the broken bit.
But even the broken bit, you can kill somebody with. Exactly right. With a gun, if it jams. I mean, in film, it doesn't matter, obviously, because you cut and you take again. In theatre or live shows, it's a far bigger problem. So if I was using a gun in a live show, I would always try and have some kind of contingency plan. And you've got to be very careful, because sometimes, I mean, I have a blank firing 9mm. If I let it off in here, it would completely deafen everybody. It might even blow a window or two out. I mean, it's massive for a tall fire, massive. So you do have to be, and of course you can kill someone with a blanket. I mean, luckily, injuries are very few and far between. There was a tragic case a few years ago when someone came off a horse and was killed. It is not gung-ho type of business. It used to be. It used to be kind of ex-boxers and bruisers who would go in. And, I mean, the only last vestiges of that are the Russian stuntmen. I've worked in Romania and Czechoslovakia. The Russian stuntmen will come in and they will do fantastic work. But they'll kill themselves. And they'll say, "We don't feel like we've been to work unless we're injured." Are you mad? You know, if I'm doing something like pats, give me more pats. Everything I can put on, everything I can use. You know, it's not a big butch thing. It's just like, I don't want to get hurt. And anyway, I can fling myself about more if I'm wearing protection. But some of the Russians are just mad. Absolutely crazy. It's wonderful horsemen. But they'll throw themselves off and break their leg. And then they'll get no pay or anything. You know, they'll just go on. Think around. Yes?
A quick technical query. You talked about a miraging blade just now.
Yeah.
What exactly is that?
It's a technical name for a very high tensile steel blade that they make nowadays, which doesn't break. They cost about £65. This one here, for instance, this medieval sword, is duralium. It is a very hard type of aluminium, but quite flexible. It's not brittle. You can see this has had a bit of work on it. Nice though to look at. You can always tell when someone's doing something right. There should be no cuts down here at all. Otherwise it's getting too close to the down hand. So it should be up there. With something like this, if you use a proper medieval weight sword, it will be too heavy for most actors. They will do that, try and stop it and break their wrist. So a lot of the time you'll use a rubber sword, I know, or a wooden sword. I mean, those battle scenes, everybody in the background is using these, absolutely everybody. And it's only the principals that might have something along these lines. Again, you can still do someone damage with one of these. This has got a steel core to it and is covered in rubber, so it doesn't flop around, which is most embarrassing when that happens.
Do occasionally see that?
Oh yeah, I mean, funnily enough, if at the end of that, although they were using lightweight steel, at the end of the Errol Flynn fight, he actually goes like that to somebody, and his sword is bent. And I mean, quite often I've got halfway through a fight and it's completely bent. It's not so bad. It's not so bad with. Just looking to see if I had a small sword, but I haven't. With the thicker blades, but with the thinner blades, it is more difficult, and that's why these ones here have got modern fencing blades in. And of course, half the thing of the fight is the style and the sound. With a real sword, you get a lousy sound, absolutely lousy, because the hilt is normally covered in wood and bound in leather. And the idea of that is to stop any vibration coming down. And therefore it deadens the sound. This one is a very lightweight 1796 cavalry weapon. That will be the type of thing that will be used by the cavalry at Waterloo. Normally, it's twice as thick as that. But as you can see, it has a wooden grip to it, which would have been covered in leather. And this particular one here is the last pattern British Cavalry, 1912. That's known as the finest sword ever made, basically. By this time, the seat on the horse had in earlier times, you would sit back on the horse, ride into battle, and slash out that way. Always away from the horse's head. Never into it, because if you missed your man, you cut into the horse's neck. So you do it that way. By this time, the seat had come forward, and you actually use this as a spear. The problem the British Army had through the ages was breaking swords. They broke all the time. So this was developed highly. It is said that you can bend this to 90 degrees without it breaking. I've never actually tried it because I don't want to bust its back. It is heavy. You need to be quite strong to use this. Unfortunately, by the time they'd actually developed this, it was no longer used. You know, probably used. It was used in the First World War. Supposedly there was a cavalry charge in the Second World War. But what I had to do later is to do this little workshop and give you some idea of the different techniques that you can use. Going from medieval up to the kind of Star Wars thing. Star Wars thing, the lightsabers, is basically a two-handed technique, which is half medieval and half Japanese. Which was quite, Peter Diamond was the stunt coordinator, and that's the kind of, working with George Lucas, that's what the style that he actually chose, which is very effective, especially with that kind of thing to it. That is 11:30. Are there any other questions? Pretty good timing, huh?
Yeah. Right, ladies and gentlemen, I've told some people anyway. Richard is, assuming you're still happy, to sign some autographs now?
Yes, of course.
We're going to take you up into the games room and get you a table there, so we'll take you off to the games room for him to sign things. He'll obviously be on doing a talk later. I had to get hold of him to get him to do something for the column, briefly, but we'll be upstairs signing autographs.
What time is the workshop Saturday?
2 o'clock, I think.
You told me 1 o'clock.
Well, it is 1 o'clock. Yes, it is 1 o'clock.
Be here at 1. I'll be here at 2.